Got it? All right. I think we're ready to go. Are you not able to log on? Oh, do we need to admit you? All right. So do you have the Zoom app?
I do. I just sent you the new agenda, and on the new agenda is the link.
No, the link is in the BOE packet. So when she sends the BOE mailing, it's part of that. Yeah.
It's not. It's just the number. So do you have the app on? I got it in from the app and then you should go to the home.
Got it. So because I refused,
right.
because I wasn't able to go to that direction.
I think we're ready to go. Are you not able to log on? Oh, do we need to admit you?
Yeah, she did. She said it.
All right.
She
So
said it when we
you
did
have
the
the
recording.
app.
There you go, Rebecca. Jim.
All right. We'll get started here in just a minute. We're working on some technical issues. Why did it not? All right, so if everybody could just turn down your volume on your speakers, then we will get started. Okay. All right, I think we're all set. We can call the meeting to order. This is the Board of Education meeting of October 20th. And this meeting is being recorded. We just ask that all participants mute themselves to prevent any interference with the meeting. You can unmute your phone by using *6. I also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that people listening by phone are able to identify the person talking. And then those of us in the room, if we keep our volume down on the speakers, it'll help. I'll try to turn the volume up on my computer so that everybody can hear. If you can't, let me know. And then also mute yourself after you're done talking. All right, so we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody will join me in saluting the flag. If I can. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And then I'll ask Ms. Zukowski if she could share our commitment to community statement.
I would be happy to. As citizens of our community, we will conduct ourselves in accordance with Newtown's core character attributes as displayed in our character tree. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for each other. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion towards others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere, to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good. And compassionate, I do have one more set of ears stuff that have never been used, if anybody wants them.
Anybody like a pair of ears to help out with this? No, but thank you.
My pleasure.
In accordance with our commitments to community. Perfect. All right, so that brings us to our celebration of excellence, which we haven't had in a long time. So it's really a great opportunity to have this evening as we're all here in the Reed Library together. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Rodriguez.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Koo. We have two very special individuals this evening who are being celebrated, and we are lucky to have both as members of our school community. First, we have Dawn Eagleson, our Parent of the Year from Sandy Hook Elementary, who represents the qualities we know are integral in supporting our students. She displays kindness, integrity, collegiality, and a deep dedication to students and staff. She takes on whatever task she is given, working with our students to ensure their success. And I know Dr. Gambos, the principal of Sandy Hook Elementary, would like to say a few words as well. Dr. Gambos?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me this evening. Can you hear me, Laura?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I just wanted to say on behalf of Sandy Hook, it's my pleasure to be with you to celebrate Dawn Eagleson. She is an exceptional human being. She has been part of the Newtown school community for many years, first as a parent to Will and Charlie, who, if anybody has the pleasure of knowing Will and Charlie, they are two of the most delightful human beings in the entire world, just like their mom, and I'm sure their dad as well. She has been with Sandy Hook about 8 years, and she exemplifies everything we want in everybody who works with our kids. She's kind, she's loving, she is honestly one of the most optimistic people, maybe the most optimistic person I've ever met. And it has been a pleasure to work with her and to, am I there? Yeah, somebody just coming in. Pleasure to work with her, and she really is a gift to Newtown Public Schools. So thank you for Cynthia, our reading specialist who nominated her, and thank you to the committee who chose her because she is exceptional.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Campos. So now we come to our Newtown Teacher of the Year, Janice Gabriel. Anyone who knows Janice understands the genuine commitment she has to students, staff, leaders, and families here in the district. Janice has an eclectic set of talents. She is both a high school English and theater arts teacher and started our unified theater program, providing opportunities for our regular education students to partner with our special education students in the production of theater. She is also the high school auditorium manager, working with students and staff to coordinate activities that take place there, which include training students to run sound and lighting for the various shows and events. And as you all know, Janice also supports the Board of Education with technology here at Reed. I know Dr. Longabuco, principal at Newtown High School, would also like to add a few comments as well on Janice's behalf. Dr. Longabuco?
Thank you. Good evening. It's my honor and privilege to briefly speak to you tonight about Newtown Public Schools Teacher of the Year, Miss Janice Gabriel. If you've ever walked through the halls at Newtown High School, whether it's 7 a.m. or 11 p.m., you have most likely run into Janice. She basically lives at Newtown High School, and the hours that she has given to Newtown Public Schools over the last 10 years are second to none. Although she is a member of both the fine arts and English departments, she's really the solo member of the theater department at Newtown High School. She teaches acting, production, design, a variety of English classes, all while juggling the building tech needs, a huge auditorium renovation project, auditorium management, and most of the tech needs for the entire district. Janice also co-founded the very successful Unified Theater Program, which puts on 2 performances a year and operates on the premise that all students have unique abilities that can be shared through the arts. Her students learn much more than theater skills. They learn compassion, as she always leads by example. This year, she even had a student dress up as her for Halloween. She truthfully cares about everyone in her path, and it's boldly evident every day. This spring, we had the incredible task of recognizing our class of 2020 seniors, and I personally could not have done it without Janice's help. She was the class of 2020 faculty advisor, and she spent hundreds of hours collecting pictures, putting together videos, helping with graduation logistics, and finally creating our class of 2020 graduation video. Looking back, I'm truly not sure how we got it all done, but I can sincerely say I'm grateful for Janice's expertise and help along the way. When I asked her colleagues about her, they said she is dedicated, committed, and really loves her job. They also said Janice is one of a kind. She puts in more hours than anyone I know. She's devoted to her students and concerned about all aspects of their lives. She's available to them anytime to listen and support them through happy as well as difficult times. And her students said, Ms. Gabriel is more than a teacher. She's a mentor and a friend, and she made my high school experience better. For Janice, the answer is always yes, even when it probably should be no, because there just aren't enough hours in the day to get everything done. But she always finds a way, gets it done, and puts others before herself. Newtown High School is a better place because Janice works there. It's my pleasure and honor to celebrate with you tonight this year's Newtown Public Schools Teacher of the Year, Miss Janice Gabriel. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Longabuco. And again, congratulations to both of you.
All right, so I think what we'll do is take just a few minutes to celebrate with the folks who are here in the room. We have some refreshments. We'll just take a few minutes and then we'll come back to the meeting after, I don't know, 5 to 10 minute break. Okay? Thank you. All right, we'll bring things back to order. Um, And we'll start with our consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion on that. Oh, wait, I need my, there we go.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of October 6, 2020, and the correspondence report.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion and Mr. Cruson seconds the motion to approve the minutes.
And correspondence.
I'm sorry, and the consent agenda. And yeah, we will need to remove the minutes of October 6th and push that to the end of the meeting. And Ms. Zukowski, did you have anything? That was it? Okay, so sensing no more items to be removed, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
And any abstentions? No, oh, we won't need abstentions for that. Okay. So that is a unanimous vote, and that brings us to our public participation. If you care to speak at public participation, the first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items on the agenda. After you're recognized, if you could please state your name and address for the record. We just request that speakers be respectful and limit their comments to not more than 3 minutes. We do not discuss personnel items or student matters in public. And then during the second public participation, we welcome commentary on items on the agenda, or you may introduce issues for the board to consider in the future. The board does not engage in dialogue during the public participation. And I will open it up now if there's anybody on the phone who would like to offer comment at this time. You can unmute yourself and just let me know. All right, I'm sensing no public participation. So we'll close out public participation and move on to reports. beginning with the chair report, and I apologize, I have quite a few things. The CABE's Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee met last week. We had a conversation spurred by a quiz that I shared with everybody earlier today. This was presented to us by Dr. Brackeen Harris, who's working with CABE. And really the idea is to, as you go through the quiz, think about how we as board members affect policy that affects those questions on the quiz. It was a very eye-opening quiz, and we had a good conversation around it. The CABE Board of Directors also met last week. There will be no CABE CAPS convention this year for many obvious reasons. Bringing that many people together in a conference center is not a good idea. But they are looking at possibly doing something in the spring. I also wanted to note that CABE's budget has fallen short for the last several years, and they have not raised our membership dues in many years. Also, their staff are frequently have pay freezes. So I just think it's worth noting this in light of all that the organization does to help our Board of Ed to learn about the complex role that we serve in, but also the advocacy they do at the legislative level. Let's see, the Board of Finance meeting happened last week, and they continued to review the CIP and discuss the non-lapsing account. And I imagine Mr. D'Elia will give us an update from the subcommittee on that. And then I've also emailed everybody to let you know that our board self-evaluation will plan on having November 10th in person. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. And then additionally, Paul Lundquist, the chair of the Legislative Council, forwarded a legal opinion from the municipal attorney regarding the education non-lapsing account. And I would like to suggest that we forward this to our board attorney for review. And then we were asked to attend the Legislative Council meeting tomorrow night. I have a conflict, so I won't be able to do it. But I also think it's well worth us having a discussion as a board before any of us go represent the board with other boards. So we'll do that. And then just for informational, the regulation for the non-lapsing account was reviewed by our legal counsel, as well as the CIP Facilities Finance Committee. And I sent it to you for your information. We'll have to see where that goes now that there's been a legal opinion from the town attorney on that. And I also finally want to clarify the discussion and voting at meetings, because I allowed for a little bit of confusion at our last meeting. So policy 9325.1 indicates that any board member shall have the opportunity to explain his or her vote for the recording in the minutes. Just so that we're all on the same page, any explanation of our votes should happen during the discussion before the vote is taken. Otherwise, we run the risk of continuing the discussion after the vote, and that's really not consistent with Robert's rules. So to make that clear, that's how we'll do things in the future. So that concludes the chair report. I don't know, that was an awful lot. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
So I was reading through, I don't know if I don't think we're talking about this later, but I was reading through some of the stuff about the non-lapsing fund. And I would imagine that we're going to ask the policy committee and probably the CIP finance and facilities committee to revisit that again. So I guess one of my questions is, in that opinion, it said that the Board of Finance, that the Legislative Council makes the final decision and not the Board of Finance. And I'm wondering, are we doing anything about this previous surplus that we had? considering that per the legislative council's attorney, the legislative council is the body that makes the decision.
Mr. Delia, can I ask you to just hold on one second? We're having audio trouble here, so that we want to make sure we hear everything you're saying.
Oh,
When somebody that's not in the room, you can turn the speaker on your computer because it's not gonna echo. You can turn the volume on, yeah.
Matt, could you hear me?
When we're speaking.
No?
It's an issue with the speaker in the room, but we'll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering if.
Okay.
I got up, I think, until I checked the video. We started to tell the question, and that's what everything else went okay.
Could you repeat the question that you were posing to us? Was there a question?
It's a very long question, but I'll rephrase it. Are we going to revisit the non-lapsing fund, or is that water under the bridge? Because according to the legislative council's, according to the letter from that attorney, the legislative council is the body that decides on the non-lapsing fund, not the Board of Finance. If I'm reading that, I read that letter a number of times, and I understand that that's the proper protocol, and that means the protocol was not followed. And I'm wondering if we are, as a Board of Education, going to revisit that, because it looks like there's about 180 days for that decision to be made with two 90-day extensions. So I'm just curious if that's something that, you know, that we're going to follow up on, because according to the legislative council, the attorney, the opinion written by the legislative, for the legislative council, they are the body that's going to decide non-lapsing fund, not the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance just makes a recommendation.
I don't want to get too much into what the town attorney's opinion is, or a discussion about what, you know, whether we agree with it or not agree with it, or what but we will make sure that we follow up on the question about the protocol that was followed with the most recent deposit. Would that be sufficient?
Yeah, and I would like to, I'm just curious if that's something that we should move forward with differently on the previous non-lapsing fund or request.
Okay, so we'll follow up with a question.
If you would follow up that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Zukowski?
It's not clear to me that it's settled yet, because
Are you on mute? Yeah.
So it's not clear that it's settled yet, because my understanding from when we had our attorney there, you know, we asked specifically about the notwithstanding language that was in the general statute. And he said that, as my recollection is, that meant that the charter did not apply. So I think we have a process where we have to go through our attorney, and then we have to likely have the two attorneys agree, because we shouldn't be in a place where one attorney says one thing and the other attorney says something that is apparently, you know, 180 degrees opposite.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we ask that question as well, whether this is consistent with the charter, whether it's consistent with the statute, and how that all comes together. Okay. All right, is there any other question on the non-lapsing fund or the chair report? Okay, sensing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes, so as you know, we're preparing for our November 3rd PD on diversity and equity. All staff will be working in virtual workshops that day with members of the Center for School Change. Dr. Derek Gay will be our keynote. It will be interactive, but it will be virtual. And he will also hold an afternoon discussion with school and town leaders and some of our peak members. So we're all really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a productive and very inspiring day. There will also be an article in the Bee this week about Talk Saves Lives. This will be virtual on November 5th and the 19th. This is a suicide prevention program, which has been a partnership between the town and our school system through the Office of Maureen Crick-Owen, Selectman, and Anna Wiedemann. We just recently all got together and did a PSA, and we wanted to share that with you this evening. Again, a big thanks to Janice Gabriel for putting the video together for us. So enjoy.
Unmute Zoom.
Okay, try again.
I'm Matt Ernillo, Director of the Newtown Community Center. Think your friend is struggling. Ask them what's up. Start a conversation. Newtown cares. You're not alone. Thank you, Matt, teacher at Newtown Middle School. I noticed you with class a few times. Are you okay? Newtown cares. You are not.
I'm Officer Stephanie McDermott with the Newtown Police Department. Ask open-ended questions. Help them to talk, not just say yes or no. Newtown cares.
I'm Maureen Crick-Owen, a selectman on Newtown's Board of Selectmen. Losing a loved one to suicide is very difficult. I know. My nephew died by suicide. Let's talk. You are not alone.
I'm Officer Will Chapman. I'm worried about you and I'd like to know what's up so I can help. Newtown cares. You're not alone.
Natalie Jackson, Director of Human Services. I haven't heard you laugh in a while. Is everything okay? You're not alone.
I'm Dr. Lori Rodriguez, Superintendent of Newtown Public Schools. Being a good friend doesn't require an instructional manual, nor do you need to be a professional to know they might need additional support. Don't worry about finding the perfect words to say. There is no right or wrong. Just be there and let them know they have your support. Newtown cares. You are not alone.
Newtown First Selectman Dan Rosenthal. A single conversation is not likely to be a cure, but your willingness to continue talking, listening, and simply being present helps more than you might know. Even just checking in to see how a friend or family member is doing can be one of the best ways to help someone struggling with depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns. Newtown cares, and you're not alone.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Are there any questions, comments on the superintendent's report? All right. None. We will move on to our committee reports. I don't know who's, we had CNI, or I see Ms. Herman Stites will do policy.
Yes. The policy committee met last week. We discussed the racial harassment policy that is on the agenda this evening, as well as the face masks coverings policy, which you'll see at a future meeting. It's just being refined. We have continued to go through our personnel policies, including a policy on nepotism that we are still under discussion with. So that's it for the policy committee report.
Good. Any other committee reports?
Yes, curriculum and instruction.
I know we had CNI.
Can you hear me? Michelle.
Oh, why can't I? I'm sorry.
Just mute himself.
Michelle,
Yeah, there we go. Thank
Michelle,
you. Miss John, go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So C and I met, and this evening you will all be hearing from Carla Tiscio and Matt Correa from Reed on the grade 5 reading and writing curriculum. You'll find it exceptional, and the wonderful part about this is that its effects will trickle down into 4th grade. It will scaffold up into 6th grade, with that curriculum being written next year, and then, of course, bridging the gap into 7th and 8th. I'm going to call your attention now to 3 other items that were discussed. One is the update on the devices, and you'll all be thrilled to hear that the saga of waiting for the back order is still in operation. However, 625 devices from another vendor were purchased. They were given to the Reed students. Those devices were then distributed to the 4 elementary schools, plus some to the middle school. So the middle school then ratioed 1-to-1. You'll be also interested to know that beginning in 7th grade, students will be issued a device that they will keep for the remaining years in the school system. And this plan will get the entire district to 1-on-1 in the next 3 years. Dr. Rodriguez mentioned the professional development plan that will be occurring on November 3rd with Dr. Derek Gay presenting to the faculty. The third item, which is, I think, fantastic, is that Ann Uberti is planning a student curriculum and instruction advisory council to increase student voice regarding curriculum and instruction in the district. The council will have 2 students per grade, 8 through 12, from a wide variety of backgrounds, I might add. And the hope is to launch this initiative in November, hold 4 meetings during the course of the year, each meeting to be dedicated to a broad topic, and allowing students to give feedback on curriculum and instruction related to that topic. And Michelle and I applaud her for initiating this. And that concludes the curriculum and instruction presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Are there any questions for C&I? All right, then we will move on to, who am I missing? CIP Committee, Finance, Facilities, Mr. D'Elia.
Hi, everybody. The CIP committee met on October 13th and welcomed Ms. Vadas. She did an absolutely wonderful job. So I want to just kind of give her a shout out. It was her first time with us, and it was wonderful. We discussed the CIP, a lot to discuss because a lot of new projects are popping up. We didn't make any changes, but we have begun discussing how to move forward. One thing in particular that we discussed was creating some sort of a reporting device method that can prioritize projects and then help us guide the CIP. We discussed COVID expenses and what we're up against right now and what we might look at in the future. We discussed virtual net metering, which I will not even attempt to try to explain to you because I can let Ms. Vadas take that one if you want, but basically we are getting some nice sizable credits for investments in clean energy, and they will pay dividends in the future. And then we also discussed a little bit about wastewater testing related to COVID. Mrs. Zakowski's doing a little bit of work on that front. The following day, we did a walkthrough of Hawley School with the Alan Adriani. Mrs. Lideline was there, which was, I thoroughly enjoyed walking through the school with her. We were actually up in the attic of the Hawley School, which it was quite an interesting trip, and just discussed all the challenges and whatnot for that project. One other thing I wanted to bring up is that I forgot regarding the CIP is that we talked about the Hawley project. There's a lot of discussion about timing on the Hawley project, but as we see it right now, the timing is moving along well. They're doing some air quality testing right now with the windows closed and the school full, which is exactly what we need. So everything seems to be moving along nicely. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions, comments from board members? No. Okay. Are there any other committee reports or subcommittee reports that we need to? All right. How about liaison activities? Ms. Zukowski?
So the Newtown Middle School PTA executive meeting was held last week. Currently, there are 3 main activities happening. The installation of Ben's Bells mural should be finished tomorrow. It started today. The October book fair is virtual this year and started yesterday, and the proceeds from that book fair are targeted for the Library Media Center. And the fundraising for PTA sponsored activities like the cultural arts events and teacher events that the PTA often throws, that fundraising has started with a shoe drive that will be continuing about a month. So if you have any old shoes out there and want a place to put them, go to the middle school PTA. A big concern expressed in the meeting is that the lack of face-to-face interactions with parents has likely led to a decline in overall membership for the PTAs. At the end of last year, the middle school PTA had over 500 members. This year to date, there are fewer than 100 members, potentially compromising planned PTA activities and student and staff outreach efforts. So if if you're interested in joining a part of this very vibrant organization, now is a good time to look to join. And their information's on the middle school website.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
I see that Dr. Correa is here, and I was just wondering, I know that Dr. Rodriguez gave a nice report, but I was wondering how the kids are doing at school and if we could get just maybe a little, how are they doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to share. We met with our PTA last night, actually, and this was one of the reports that I gave, that our kids are doing very, very well. Beyond, Jill Beaudry, our assistant principal, and I were always worried at the beginning about masks and the safety protocol. And I really have to commend all the parents in Newtown because they really have taken this seriously and spoke to their kids about it. And what I keep reminding teachers is, our kids have been out for 6 months. It was 3 months of the school year and then the summer. I think that did have a big impact on them, and they take it very seriously. I think they're happy to be there. I can speak to date, Jill and I have not had one discipline issue that really involved safety, which was wonderful. Nothing that compromised the safety of any classmates. Teachers are, as Ms. Tishio can also speak to, teachers are working around in creative ways to make sure that they're engaging students and keeping them engaged and doing it in a safe manner. And I know Mrs. Tishio is one of the teachers that is doing that with, being creative with students still wearing their masks, of course, always, with their desk shields facing each other and being able to have a conversation with that extra layer of protection. So it's little things like that are really sparking the engagement. But I have to say that the safety protocol that all the parents in Newtown really stressed, I think, with their children really came forward in our schools. And again, to date, we have not had one safety concern brought to our attention that was discipline wise. And that's really good to see. Our kids are, we're here for the kids. And that's what, each day, as everything that we do and all of the work that we do is definitely worth it because they're just so happy to be there together and they're working really hard. It's really great to see.
All right, an extra
Thank you, Dr. Correa.
extra bonus of having guests at the meeting. We can ask them questions. Thank you. It's good to hear that. All right. Were there any other liaison activities or reports I'm missing? All right, so we'll move on to our high school report and our two representatives from the high school. We have Ms. Clara and Mr. Jerfy.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about a little about the students' thoughts on everyone coming back to school soon. So the majority of the people that I talked to, they're all really excited about it and they're looking forward to having class with everyone again. However, there are people who are a little bit concerned about an increase in COVID cases, which is expected. Another thing people don't seem to be very fond of is the new schedule that we'll be following once everyone's back in school. Many students I found are happy with the block schedule and don't really like the idea of having to go to another remote class after leaving school. And there were other students who were fine with that and who were just happy to come back fully. In terms of the transition from home to school, for cohort D students in particular, if they choose to come back, I think it'll go pretty smoothly. And that's based on my personal experience. I didn't have much trouble adjusting once I came back. I'd also like to talk about sanitation in school, which I think is going very well. Students are wiping down their desks before and after class and sanitizers in every single classroom. So that's really helpful.
Good evening, members of the Board of Ed and Superintendent Dr. Rodri. So to segue from the last board meeting, we talked about the seniors taking the SAT. So the scores were released last Thursday, October 15th. And I know also all the seniors should now be able to see their scores on their College Board's accounts as soon as they log in. I know all the seniors are very grateful that we were able to take it in school since the March one got postponed or rescheduled. So now they can send in their scores if they so choose. The early action and early decision deadlines for college are fast approaching. Most are within the next few coming weeks. So it's especially important for seniors to start sending in their scores if they plan to use them. So it's great that we just got them back. And then as far as the juniors, they just took the PSAT last Wednesday. So their scores will come back in a couple more weeks. We have made it to just about halfway through the fall sports season, and the athletes are looking forward to finishing out the full schedule, which is wonderful. Parents seem to be adjusting to the new fan system well and are accessing the live online streams when we have away games. And then as far as home games, I just wanted to show you guys the what I mentioned last time, the pass that the parents wear when they come to the game. So this one is for me because it's my parents, but it just says the sport, our name, and then has a nice hawk on it. And then, so I will say it's a little disappointing not like looking up and not seeing any fans, but all of that disappointment goes away when I hear from some of my family members about how much they loved watching me on their TVs that night. It was always great to hear. The 7v7 football games have been going well, especially for the Nighthawks, as we sit 3-0 going into our next game next week. The senior night for the football players was supposed to be this Friday, but it has since been postponed because the other team couldn't play. But it will be rescheduled for their next game. Unified Soccer had their first game yesterday at Blue and Gold Stadium with Bethel. So it's great to see the Blue Blaze back on the field having fun. I know Mr. Memley tweeted some videos from some of the players on the field, which I watched, and it was very good to see. The NHS Band and Guard had their senior recognition night last Saturday night, October 17th. It had to be held a bit different this year, with only parents coming to watch the show and no alumni. However, they were still able to have a great night, even with dinner. Each participant had a boxed meal. And then they took turns taking pictures with their parents on the field, and it all turned out to be a pretty great evening. Clubs and sports teams have created different ways to fundraise this year to help with safety from the virus. A couple of teams and organizations have designed masks to wear. So I know the field hockey team did that, as we all got masks that look like this, that have our numbers, and it just says Newtown Field Hockey on the side. And I know a lot of other sports have done that too, football, volleyball, and as well as some clubs. I think band did it as well, so they all can have matching masks for their shows or when they're coming off on and off the field. Other teams like the varsity cheer team are holding can drives to reduce the amount of contact from person to person by just having people come drive by and drop off their cans, rather than like an event where a bunch of people are hanging around. I think the car drive-by is a real safe way to go about it, and a good way to keep fundraising and doing things for the community. Students should pay close attention in the next coming weeks to the morning announcements, as other clubs are looking for members and starting to meet again. So these include Student Gov, who are looking for more participants this year, the Hawks Honors Association, and the History Club. There's also a virtual meeting for anyone interested in the fall drama tomorrow after school. So it's wonderful to see these things start up again and all happening given the circumstances. And hopefully maybe they'll have in-person meetings when we go back November 2nd. So our next report is after everyone will be back to school. So we look forward to giving you the initial feedback and letting you all know how it goes. And I am personally very excited, so I can't wait. And that's all.
Thank you. It's good to hear that so many activities are still going on despite everything, and that we're able to figure out how to make things happen. So thank you for the report. Do we have any board member questions or comments? I sense none. All right, well, thank you so much for sharing everything that's going on. It's really good to hear about how things are happening despite what's going on, and we do look forward to hearing your report next time. It should be interesting. All right, and please stick around. We'd love to have you be part of the discussion as we go through the agenda. All right, so that brings us to our financial report. So I will entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending September 30, 2020.
Second.
So Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion, and I will turn it over to Ms. Vadas to give us the report. Oh, are you on mute? What is going on? Let's see. If you yell really loud, it'll come down to my computer and what's that?
Yeah, that's Ann.
Yeah, Ann, can you just move your computer over and maybe she can shout loud enough? Oh. I think that's what she was trying to do.
She connected to Zoom. She's not dialed in, she's connected to Zoom.
She's not dialed in. Yeah, why don't we just use the computer, the laptop?
Right, so you should be unmuted. Go ahead. Good. Yep. Okay.
expenditures, encumbrances, and we have just begun to make some projections listed under anticipated obligations. At this time, all certified and non-certified staff have been fully encumbered. During the month of September, the Board of Education spent approximately $5.7 million. $4 million was spent on salaries, and the remaining $1.7 million on all other objects, including tuition and transportation. The main object accounts are mostly showing a positive balance for the quarter. However, we are experiencing some stress in the sub-accounts as unanticipated costs related to the pandemic have occurred. We do anticipate some relief in these areas as funds become available through the Corona Relief Grant and the town's capital non-recurring fund. The Corona Relief Grant was submitted to the state for approval on October 2nd in the amount of $380,841. We anticipate the grant award notification to be issued within the next week or two. And at that time, we will recommend using these funds towards PPE and other approved costs. As Mr. Delia explained last week, I did present information on the virtual net metering project, and won't get into all of the details. I'll just let you know that the project has come online for the high school, and we are experiencing some credits. These credits will show up on our Eversource bill every month. Just very quickly, the way the virtual net metering will work is we will receive a solar credit from Eversource, which is based on the amount of kilowatts that are produced at the solar farm, less a fixed rate per kilowatt to the developer, and the net becomes a credit that we will see on our Eversource bill every month. So we're just beginning to see these credits, and we're going to wait for more information to come in, and hopefully next month we can report on these savings. We also have been informed that 5 more schools will be coming online within the next few months, with the exception of Middlegate, which would hopefully come online perhaps next year once that project is up and running. There were no emergency repairs for the month to report, but I would like to highlight a few sub-accounts within the major accounts. So, I'm not sure if everybody has the report, but if we turn to page 2, I'd like to briefly talk about the certified salaries account. You'll notice that in this area, we have a negative balance of $417,000. And the majority of this is coming from the teacher salaries. And this is something that we have not seen in the past, and especially this early in the year. This is primarily due to 2 factors. We've recently added new unbudgeted positions that were required for additional educational support due to the constraints of smaller class sizes, as well as providing coverage for those teachers that are out on leave. And second, this year we have increased our estimated savings from turnover to $624,000. Over the past, the average budgeted turnover was roughly between $160,000 and $300,000, which we could typically achieve. But this year, being far from typical, is going to be difficult to achieve. And combining these 2 factors together has created this negative balance. So this is an area of concern, and we'll be monitoring this very closely throughout the year. If you take a look at the non-certified salaries, we're expecting, or we believe that this may produce a small positive balance in this area. We are still looking to fill paraeducator positions and business office staff. We have not made any projections in those areas right now. And we've also experienced more turnover than usual in our secretary and custodial unions. So those will produce some small balances. In employee benefits, we are seeing a sharp rise in our unemployment costs. And as it looks right now, this is going to be an area of concern. We have received partial credits from the states, which will flow through December. However, if the claims continue as they have, we will see a larger deficit in this area. We will be working closely with the HR department to determine the eligibility and the validity of all these claims that come through. Under professional services, you will notice that there are not any forecasts under professional educational services. And this account is directly related to employee training. So I'm sorry, yeah, we haven't made any determination. because we're still working on determining our current and future staff needs for training. We will continue to have conversations with administrators regarding the staff training and the needs of our district. Under purchase property services, again, we have not forecasted any costs in this area of building emergency repairs and equipment repairs, as these accounts are sometimes more difficult to predict. However, we do anticipate more expenses to incur, and we will be working with the Director of Facilities to manage these accounts. We will also keep the board apprised of any emergency repairs in the amount of $5,000 or more. Under other purchase services, we are currently experiencing a positive balance in transportation as our in-district contract has been lowered by 2 days. This has resulted in the $37,000 credit. We also have a credit on the account for our out-of-district transportation in the amount of $145,000. And this was a carryover from last year to be used towards current year invoices. Also, the special education tuition account is showing a positive balance when combined with the excess cost grant. However, we typically do not make a projection in this account until November, as placements and immediate agreements are still ongoing. By the end of November, the grant will be recalculated to capture all the enrollment changes that have occurred. And at that time, we'll have a more accurate projection of this account, as well as the out-of-district transportation account, which includes excess cost grant revenue. Under supplies, we've made a few projections in this area, and you'll notice a large deficit in the plant supplies, which is directly related to the PPE and other COVID-related costs. Also in the supply accounts are our energy accounts, and you'll notice that we have not made any projections in this area. We will continue to work on these accounts in the months to come as the virtual net metering data is still coming in. And under property, you'll notice a large deficit under technology equipment. And this is directly related to the costs that have been incurred during the pandemic. And this is related to devices. So we will be monitoring that account closely as well. I have nothing else to report or highlight. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on the financial report? Not sensing any, so we'll go ahead and take a vote on that. All those in favor of the financial report as presented? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, so that's unanimous. All right, and that brings us to our presentation. So we have the presentation on the first read of the grade 5 language arts curriculum. And as Mr. Voros mentioned, we had the pleasure of hearing about this in curriculum and instruction. And I don't who would like to start off with this?
I'd be happy to.
All right, so let's we'll have Ms. Oberti speak to this, and then we can jump right into the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Carla Ticcio, who led the curriculum writing team at Reed. This has been a work in progress for a few years, beginning when I was the principal of Reed, and Dr. Correa took over the leadership of the building and really provided the team with a lot of support, a lot of time. He dedicated a lot of his own influence to the curriculum, and with Carla assisting him and a great team of teachers in 5th grade, they really pushed it over the finish line. So we're very grateful. It is outstanding, and I'm thrilled to see it, to be able to sit here and see it come to the board for approval. So with that, I'm going to hopefully share Carla's presentation, and then I'll turn it over to she and Dr. Correa. And I am disabled from screen sharing. Can you enable me? Just
I can share it with Michelle if that's better.
got it. Okay, we're good to go.
Did you need to say something, Dr. Correa? Can I go?
No, you can certainly start. I do want to just chime in for a second though. This curriculum would not be possible today without Ann Uberti though. And you know, Ann and I had so many discussions about this when I was able to take over at Reed last year. And I will say a lot of Ann's influence is in this curriculum too. Her knowledge is in this, her support is in this. And you know, really I helped carry out what she had started and I take great pride in that. So this would not be possible without Ann, and we're excited that next year you'll be able to see it, hopefully this time our 6th grade curriculum, which too Ann has also heavily influenced. And again, this is just really, I'm really excited for Carla to share this with you today. As Ann said, it's a piece of work that really took a lot of time and sweat, and it's so good for kids. So I'll stop talking and let Carla go into that, but we couldn't go any further without just acknowledging Ann's efforts as well, because a lot of her influence is in this, and it's all for kids, which is I'm very proud of. Carla?
Yes, so thank you. I couldn't agree more. Thank you both for all your support, and I will reiterate that we were a great team. So I just want to say before we go on, I want to speak to that what Dr. Correa was talking about earlier, and finding creative ways to teach this year. And I want to say that the technology has been so key, and the kids are so happy to have it. And literally, they were smelling the devices when they came in the first day and said they had like new car smell. But one of the things that we can do, because there's Google Meets, is we can put every kid in the class on a Google Meet. And so the kids at home have a variety of kids to interact with every single day. And we can shuffle them around and ask a question and then shuffle them again. And it's sort of like a speed dating thing. And we're having a lot of fun. And the technology, I hear the cost of it is great, but it's key to success this year for us, and has given the kids a big boost. With that said, Peggy Kennedy and Jackie McMahon and I worked on this curriculum together with Matt and Ann's support, and we were a crackerjack team. Peggy Kennedy is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to English language arts, K through 6. Jackie McMahon has a laser focus on whatever the task at hand may be. And I brought my understanding and love of concept-based curriculum to the table. And I'm ready for the next slide. So we did take a lot of things into consideration when we were writing this curriculum, and we can go on to the next slide. And one of those things is that 5th graders aren't just slightly bigger 4th graders. There's a whole host of characteristics that are starting to develop in a 5th grader that needed to be considered. The next slide, yeah. So they're prone to all kinds of things, growth spurts, making them hungry throughout the day. They do still have that mostly happy, optimistic view of the world, which starts to change, as you know, in middle school. They have an increased desire for social interaction with peers, and that peer group starts to narrow a little bit. It's not, you don't invite everybody to your birthday party anymore. Now you have a peer group that you want to be with. You have an increased analytic and problem solving ability, increased desire and ability to play cooperative and competitive games, and sensitive to and able to resolve issues related to fairness. So all of those things were considered, as well as what's on the next slide, which are all the sort of logistical things we have to think about. The Common Core, Readers and Writers Workshop, concept-based curriculum instruction, really elevating and specifying the grammar, convention, and vocabulary development. as that was always something that was sort of relied upon but not specified in the curriculum. K-8 vertical alignment and sort of complementing, creating reading and writing units that support each other to maximize use of time. So the units of study, Unit 1. So the first one is similar to units you would see in other K-8 units of study. It's about independence, about reminding kids, getting them back into the routines of school, monitoring themselves, and really we ask them to think and bring to bear all the skills they bring to bear on all the activities that they love, like playing games, video games, and football. What is it that gets you to the next level in a video game? We want you to bring that stamina, that determination. What is it that if you lose a football game makes you want to go back the next week and try harder the next week? We want you to bring those skills, that perseverance to bear here in school. If you can do it on the football field, you can do it here in school. And similarly in writing, the focus, it's a short unit, it's 4 weeks, and it's filled with all kinds of other things like beginning of the year assessments. So it's not as much time as it might seem like it is. But it's really, how do we respond to reading? How do we respond to it clearly, accurately, with proper conventions? And so it's really sort of a short unit that focuses on getting these kids ready for all the other work they're going to do the entire school year. So we try to integrate that idea that they need to be social and that learning needs to be relevant, that they sort of have a more sophisticated mind now. So this is just a picture of them practicing together with a Mad Lib. So we're inserting the grammar in something that is a piece of writing in which you can't really insert a noun and make it make sense unless you really know what a noun is. Unit 2 is a longer unit, and this focuses on fluency, and this is very new, and this might be what I'm proudest of in this curriculum, because we feel like they are fluent when they get to 5th grade. But what happens to 5th grade in the reading, it becomes way more sophisticated. Their speech becomes more sophisticated, and the sentence structure and the syntax in the books that they're reading become more complicated. And if you can't follow, if there's 2 separate clauses or 3 separate clauses in one sentence, if they can't follow the punctuation and understand that punctuation will affect the meaning of the sentence, then they can't advance as readers into the levels that they should be reading. So again, we make it playful. We're reading poetry and all kinds of materials that they can read out loud, dramas, plays, so that they're acting it out and they're filming themselves. We had a little video to share with you, but as with everything, it seems to be the theme for the evening, the technology. I had to get rid of it, but we used Flipgrid and we recorded them reading poetry out loud. And one of the things they had to do was decide what the punctuation did to their voice and really what the punctuation did to the meaning. And so like 3, an ellipsis at the end of something means something happened, right? And what is it? You have to use those inferential skills and know that it's not just a pause, because everything's a pause, right? They like to say that it's a pause. Yes, what does the pause mean? So a lot of focus on that. Again, preparing them for all the reading they're going to be doing the rest of the year. And similarly in the writing, it's short and sweet, it's concise writing. The understanding that audience and purpose drive your format and drive your word choice. They wrote emails to Dr. Correa the other day, and I reminded them of their this writing unit where audience and purpose mattered. So if you're writing to Dr. Correa, we're not going to see a lot of little emojis, although I know he secretly likes those things. We're going to see proper format with a comma after Dear Dr. Correa and from whoever you are at the bottom. And we can go on. Oh, I thought I deleted it, but I didn't. Unit 3. So this is a fantasy narrative unit. So it's called Over the Rainbow because we all start together using the Wizard of Oz, which you'd be surprised, only about 15% of the kids have seen it at this point. So it's a good cultural experience for all of us to share. And we learn about or build on what they have learned about the story arc, and close reading and theme are all in there. developing theories about setting, because it's an important element in narrative fantasy. And the narrative writing that we do on the other side is called Based on a True Story. And it focuses on craft, but it is a memoir writing unit or a personal narrative writing unit that builds on that story arc, but also allows them to put some fictional element into a story that might be true. If they can't remember every detail, they can add some details. If they would like to have their inner thinking be portrayed by a talking squirrel, they can do that as well. And here's the celebration, recognizing that they like to eat and like to be social and celebrate. So we give them opportunities to do so. Reading and writing, unit 4. So trash and treasure, this is about accuracy. And so this trash and treasure refers to what are you going to keep when you're taking notes and what are you going to throw away, basically what doesn't meet your needs. So we're gonna build on the prior unit, close reading, develop awareness of text structure and its impact on meaning to facilitate accurate and meaningful note-taking. So on the other side, the writing is called What Do You Know? It's about research, and it's using that text structure to their advantage to build meaningful texts of their own based on the notes that they have taken. Unit 5, just the facts, and we focus on analysis. So we want to deepen their understanding of accuracy and develop fact-based opinions. So they're going to analyze now. They're going to be continuing to take those notes. They need to still be accurate, but now we're going to analyze them and develop our opinions based on those facts. And we'll be writing an opinion. And relevance is the lens here. And again, it's about thinking about what is relevant to what I'm writing about here. Do I need this piece of information? Is this supporting what I want to say, or is it extra? And so we end this year by sort of hearkening back to what we did at the beginning of the year when we taught them to write emails, by writing opinion letters to parents about maybe where they want to go on vacation, or to teachers about where they might want to take a field trip. But the culminating experience is a letter to next year's 5th grade student coming in, letting them know what 5th grade is like and what their opinion is of 5th grade. And so ideally, now the 5th grade team is going to work together to further specify the core learning activities and what their formative and summative assessments are. And we can take a look at Rubicon. I'm not sure what the protocol is here this evening, but there's a link there. We can go to Rubicon. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Let's see if we can get back. So thank you so much. That's a great presentation and gives us a good idea of what's in the curriculum. I don't know if there are any questions this evening. Are there any board members, or including our student members who are still here? Does anybody have any questions on the curriculum? Yeah, Mr. D'Elia.
First of all, I think this is awesome. I was loving the fact that you included communication via email. I think that's something that's going to be a new art, and I think it's important for kids to understand that text typing is not appropriate in every situation. But I was wondering, with our current situation, what tool do you have? All the tools that you need to conduct and properly implement this curriculum with fidelity, in our current situation where the kids can't, I see you have like stop and jots and whatnot. So I'm just wondering how you're handling all these with using digital resources. If you could just speak to that for a second. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So it's been a lot of fun discovering all the tools, and we were so fortunate last year that almost everybody opened up their their applications for free to us. So we got to try everything and see what it was like. But Google in and of itself has a treasure trove of apps. And so one app that allows us to do the stop and jot, which is typically done on a sticky note, is called Jamboard. And
Wow.
Jamboard has sticky notes in it. And so to me, I've been looking for a replacement for sticky notes for years because they usually are all over the floor. So these sticky notes stay in the computer. And just today we annotated a text. It has a highlighting tool. So I took a screenshot of a piece of text, put it in the Jamboard. They're able to highlight, annotate it, put sticky notes on it, and respond to that text virtually.
Thank you.
I see Ms. Zukowski has a question.
Yeah. How will you be determining the success level of the program?
So those are in the next steps. So the strengthening of the assessments will determine whether or not the program has been successful. The ability to implement it fully with fidelity and teachers coming together at PLCs and being able to talk about what they're doing, talk about student learning. And I think Anne knows that as we practice the curriculum, there's always going to be little tweaks as we have to respond to things that change in the world, right? So the world is a changing place. Email is becoming something we should start teaching, as Mr. Julius pointed out. So, but in terms of fidelity and knowing if we're successful, we're going to have assessments in place that mirror the lenses and the concepts that are in the curriculum. And if the students are able to articulate something meaningful in their own words that relates to the, help me, Anne, what's the, not the guiding questions, but
Generalization.
thank you, the generalizations, then we'll know they were successful.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Dr. Koo, if I could just add one more thing too.
Yes, please.
One, Mrs. Zukowski, I'm glad you brought that up with success. And I have to say, and Carla can add to it, success I saw today as a building principal was in our PLC. And our PLC had a very stimulating conversation. And we talked a lot about in 6th grade today and in 5th as well. We had PLC today. Our annotation discussion was great. Don't you agree, Carla? And it made us think as educators and reflect why we're doing what we're doing. And that's what I've noticed about this curriculum. It is truly challenging us as educators and the teachers and pushing them to ask themselves why they're doing this. And we're talking about what we're noticing kids are doing and what we want to see. And, you know, as a building principal, I have to say, I saw success in that today during our conversation when we reflected on what a few people have done, what someone else has done, what someone wants to do. And we're looking at all of that and saying, but next year we're going to try this way. And we're going to see if like those conversations have started. And, you know, Carla leads that charge a lot. And that's what's making us all grow, myself included. So it's funny that you asked about the success, but as a principal, I saw the success today with the teaching staff. And I was very proud of the level of conversations. And Carla knows that's where our PLCs are right now. And that's where they're going to stay with this conversation about learning activities and the curriculum and the assessments and matching them and what we want to get out of it and what we hope to get out of it. And that's what's so exciting about this curriculum, that it lends itself for us to do that throughout our PLC meetings. So it was a very proud moment for me today in that discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed being part of, Carla. And as you saw, I even had to take a few pauses because it made me really reflect as an administrator about practice with children. So it was great.
So good to hear. And we're lucky that it happened today, so you could bring it to us tonight. Yeah. All right. Do we have any other comments or questions from board members? Anyone? No. All right. So we thank you for being here with us this evening and giving us that information, and we'll have the chance to look at it in more detail over the next 2 weeks before our next meeting, where we'll have the second read and hopefully the approval of the curriculum. But if board members have any questions between now and then, they'll be sure to get those questions to Ms. Uberti to get to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And thank you, Carla. Amazing. Thank you, everybody.
All right, so that will bring us to old business and our COVID update. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Rodrigue to address any, this is really sort of a broad topic, and you can bring us up to date on things.
Sure. Well, just to talk very briefly, as you know, we had the one case, the positive case, and I sent communication to families, and this was a high school case. But again, this is, I hope everyone realizes this is always to be expected. And I have to say again, thanks to Donna Colbert and as our Director of Health, who conducts a majority of our contact tracing in partnership with us, and that really quickly helps maintain infection spread. So, but as you know, we are planning to bring our 7 through 12 students back on November 2nd. I'm glad the students are excited about that, as we are. Our 7 through 12 students have been on hybrid. As you know, our K-6 is back. We did send a survey out to the families, just as we did with our K-6, to determine the percentage of our students who would be returning to in-person, or those who would remain working remotely. The survey didn't end till today, but I took a quick peek at it before I came here, and we're close to between 75 and 80% at the high school, and it wasn't complete yet. So I assume that's going up, who will be returning, and 86% and climbing who would be returning to the middle school. So those are really good numbers of students who feel comfortable and confident coming back. We have, when I looked, we had close to 45 to 50% students who would be utilizing bus transportation as well. So I will have better numbers for you as today ends, and we review it again tomorrow. But it looks like a good portion of our students will be returning. Closely related to that and returning to school, and despite what you see as an uptick, little outbreaks in various districts, some surrounding towns, my weekly call to the state, it's actually the DPH and the state health department and the epidemiologists who were on the call. They're on the call every week. But it was a very positive conversation today. This is the second time I've heard them really emphasize the fact that students are not rapid spreaders of the infection. And that they were talking about attending school is safer than even going to a restaurant or a grocery store. That's what they are seeing. And I've heard this from any expert out there, from the DPH to the state, and even beyond that. So I do want to highlight that because I hear it again and again. And one of the things they pointed out was, look at all the schools that are open, look at the athletics that is taking place at the school level. So, and one of the reasons they give is simply because we're prepared in the public schools, in the school system. We've prepared since June. And I think one of the things that came up that Dr. Correa brought up this evening is true, that parents in our community have been completely compliant, and you can see that they have really put that emphasis with their children, and that helps a great deal. Things like wearing masks and washing hands. I know Ann and Frank have been in all of the buildings, and I've been around to the buildings. I was just in Hawley and Middlegate. I'm sorry, Meadow. just this past week. And I have to say, I think Dr. Correa was right. We have not seen any lack of compliance with students, and that is very significant. And so I think that will really, you're going to see that at the high school. It's already happening as well. So we feel really good about bringing students back. Now, again, this being said, there's always a caution there as well. We don't know what will happen in 2 weeks or a month or 6 months. So I state that this in every communication I have with parents that, again, we're monitoring it. We're less than 1% here in Newtown. I know there were cases in various schools. It seemed to all happen on Friday, but I think there were a couple today in various districts. But again, that is to be expected. You're around people that may have COVID. And so I just want to thank the community though, and the staff. The staff is doing the work and really taking this seriously and really supporting students. And that's what's helping here. So thank you to all of the staff as well. And I did want to mention, I'm working with Whitson's Food Service. Actually, Tanya and I were on a call with the head of Whitson's and the general manager, Joe Stengo. And there will be impacts to our food services here. We know that there will be losses. Basically, students are not getting the full a la carte lunch that they're normally used to, whether it's hybrid. And even when we come back, there will still be box lunch because of the schedule. As you know, the high school is the only school that had not been typically on the national lunch program. But we are most likely going to go back to it this year. And the reason for that, and we're talking about it with Whitson's, there was a waiver that the state said you could. Usually you've made that decision prior to, and then of course they came out with the extension of the summer program where you could get free lunch. The problem is that is only reimbursable to districts who are on the free lunch, the national lunch program. We are K-8, but we are not 9-12. So we've been subsidizing because we felt it's not fair that our high school students don't get free lunch when everyone else does. I did mention that in my Sunday highlights, I think a couple of weeks ago. The issue, if we were all in, we would go back to, in a normal year, typical year, we would go back to being off the program. And the reason for that is usually high schools are off because they lose money. The portion control and some of the restrictions typically impact high schoolers more than they do, say, a third grader. But because we're only using box lunches and it's free, to get the reimbursement from the state, we're going to go back for the rest of the year. This extent, now it was only going to go to December 31st. The free lunch is now what we're hearing extended for the remainder of the year and may even go into September. That's even what Whitson's heard. So we will at least be going off of it and back onto the National School Lunch Program for the remainder of the year. And again, I've talked to Joe Stengo, the general manager. He is, fairly certain he can really do up some really nice box lunches so kids it will be appetizing for them. So I'm hoping that the high school students will be okay with the box lunches. It will be picking them up as they go for early dismissal. And I said, really be creative. But again, it's portion control and it's very restricted as opposed to the a la carte. But since we're not doing a la carte anyway, we didn't feel it made a real difference. All I have.
All right, so do we have any questions? Mr. Cruson?
It's more of a comment, really. I was disappointed to hear vision around the distance learning for absences. It was my understanding when we approved the action plan.
I can't hear Dan. Dan, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Mhm.
Okay. I was saying that I was disappointed to hear the change around the absences and distance learning because my understanding when we approved the reentry plan was that it would be there for all absences in an attempt to combat having other illnesses coming into the school, not necessarily COVID, but other things that like colds, flu, that kind of thing. And the fact that they have to miss at least one day and they have to be able to set, the parent has to call in and say that their kid's going to be out for the next 3 days, 4 days, 5 days to be able to utilize distance learning. I think that's going to result in more parents sending kids that are sick with more minor things. So I was disappointed to hear that. And I guess that's really all I had to say about that. I was hopeful. I realized there's some challenges there, but I also think there were ways to work around that. So even if a kid's out for an undisclosed period of time, or for an unknown period of time, 1-2 days, they could still utilize distance learning to some extent so they don't miss out too badly.
So I can respond if, yeah. So if you look at, when we wrote the reentry plan, we were really looking at hybrid and distance learning when it came to the attendance. If you go back to the addendum, and I can share that again because there were so many addendums, they're hard to keep track of. But the addendum by the state was very clear with respect to attendance. There's actually a whole plan, and it really focused on hybrid and distance learning. And that was so that students who were, because you would already be working with remote learners in those settings. When you go to a full in, what we were starting to see, we're already back with K-6 and coming back with high school, it was becoming extremely difficult for teachers. I know it sounds easy that a student can just jump on, but they had students who were unprepared. They didn't have their workbooks that they needed. They didn't even have time to scan the materials to students. So students were becoming very upset online because they weren't prepared. And of course, parents didn't know because they just think if I go on or I put my student on, all is well. But we have to look at the instructional side. It has to be good for students. So we did get together, and it could have been longer, but we decided, look, if you're going to call in by, and this is the normal attendance process. So if a parent calls in, they call in by 10 a.m. We at least have, teachers at least have, sometimes it is less than 24 hours to make sure that the student has the device at home, that they can scan the material. So there's a lot more that they can actually be put in the proper group work. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I think if you look on the educational side, I have to say, I've talked to maybe 2 or 3 parents who wrote in and just asked the question because it was a change. So that was really, their question was really about the change. And I think we were very clear when we put that out, but they understood when I explained it to them because they know that it isn't as simple. And not to mention, and Carla's not online anymore, but if you talk to any of the educators who do not have remote learners anymore. So that's the other thing. The more and more students, we're 90% back in at K-6. And we'll be, obviously 85 to 90% hopefully back 7-12. So that leaves very few students online, working remotely. So there are teachers that even have to set up in order for that to happen. And the honest to goodness truth is that was becoming an issue. So I think 24 hours is fair. I think the parents I spoke to understand, and I think it's fair to our teachers as well.
So I see Ms. Ladline, did you have something to add to that?
I had a question for Lori. Lori, I know that, I'm sorry.
Muted. Oh, there you go.
I know that I understand the concerns with the educators is definitely as an educator, I want as many kids, even if they're home, to pop in. But it's incredibly, it's just a hot mess sometimes. I did want to ask too, did the nurses at all talk about the fact that if kids are homesick with a flu or some other illness, that they should really be resting in order to recover? Was that discussed at all?
Well, I think that's another good point. It's come to the point where if a student really truly is ill, we don't want them to obviously take that time to just come online because they feel they're missing. Our teachers are going to give them as they always have, and we're being extremely flexible about that. The teachers are even sending a lot of that work that evening if they know that, tomorrow you're going to be out again, but you will be online. So you're right. I think that's a piece of this as well, that there has to be some rest time too if students are truly sick.
All right.
Did I answer your question? Well, and the nurses are having those conversations, if that was your question. In fact, I think Miss Ann Dalton put a communication out again, just talking about attendance and illness and all of those things that parents call in with questions about.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? I have one question. I know the state is providing the, rapid antigen tests now, the BINEX tests. And I know that we have, the school-based health center, and we had talked about that on the reentry plan, how we might be able to utilize our school-based health center. And I was wondering if we would be eligible through our school-based health center to be able to use those rapid tests.
That's a great question, and that just came up on the call today. I should have put it in my report. I think in Connecticut, they hope to get over 1 million tests, and we can be a school, and I've shared this with Donna Colbert and Ian Dalton. So we're going to look into being one of the pilot schools so that and we have a school-based health center, so it's perfect. They do have to apply. So we'll look into whether we can do that or not, but to get staff and students tested in using the rapid test would be really great, and that would help a lot. So yes, that did come up today. So we're looking into that.
Okay, good to hear. All right, any other questions or comments? All right. I think that'll bring us to our discussion and possible action on budget assumptions and priorities. So I don't know if we're ready to make a motion on this or whether you want to discuss it more. Why don't we try a motion and we'll see if we can make some progress on this.
I move that the Board of Education approve the BOE budget assumptions and priorities for 2021-2022.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. I sent everybody, or in your packet, you had a revised assumptions and priorities. Would it help if I go through what the changes were? It was based on, thank you. So going through the assumptions quickly, I changed number 4 to make it shorter and simpler. Safety, security, and health standards will be supported. I mean, we can keep the detail in there if you'd like. I removed it. I added number 8 based on our discussion about, and this is really this comes directly from our resolution that we passed a couple months ago on promoting diversity and equity, because we talked about adding something to the assumptions about that as well as the priorities. There's a couple items in the priorities. So this really speaks to addressing the policies, curriculum, and professional development in the context of racism and bias that might promote barriers to student learning. And then in the priorities, the second item, I changed the wording simply to remove the word level from that item. We talked about that at the last meeting. I changed the word continue to provide just to be a little, mix up the words that we're using in this list. I removed, added number 3, update and support the 5-year plan for the ongoing maintenance of buildings and grounds and vehicles. I don't know if that's appropriate, but we talked about addressing maintenance. I removed, and that really replaces the item. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my edited version. It replaced what was there previously about creating a plan for maintenance. And then the 6th item, I simply added in the wording to base the adequate funding on a 5-year average difference to the budget so that it's based on something. I know we've every year just talked about $100,000 contingency, but maybe it should be, maybe it's time to talk about bringing that up. And then, let's see, number 8, supporting the professional development and staffing that furthers the district's resolve to maintain a safe, inclusive, and equitable learning environment for all students. Really, it addresses, again, what we had in our resolution that we passed a couple months ago. And supporting the development of academic pathways and instructional activities, extracurricular opportunities, and field experiences that support the needs of all students and that promote a richer awareness of culture and racial diversity. And then finally, adding an item, include additional supports needed to address learning deficits that result from the interruptions to student learning due to the pandemic. And that was part of our discussion at our last meeting as well. So why don't we just start with anybody who wants to revise any of those? And I see Ms. Herman's face.
I don't necessarily want to revise them, but it seems like what you were reading is a little bit different than what was in our packet.
Oh, is it?
So I don't know.
It looked the same to me.
I don't know. I'm looking at the packet. It's just a little bit different. Some of your wording was a little bit like, you said ensure additional supports needed to address learning deficits caused by the interruptions to student learning due to COVID. In what I'm looking at from the packet just says learning deficits and interruptions to student learning due to the COVID pandemic. So there's just like some slight variations. Your version that you're reading actually reads a little bit better than the version in our packet. So I just want to make sure that we're approving the, does anyone have the same, you all have this that I just read, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then there was another one too, I think, on number 8 on the second page as well, the priorities. You said, ours says support professional development in staffing that help to maintain a safe, inclusive, and equitable learning environment. I think you said something about that is in line with the board's resolve to maintain a.
Those
were the ones
I was adding that.
As you read it. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's the same because some of the things you were reading were a little bit better than the way it was written.
Really?
Especially that last one, I think made a little bit more sense. Number 10, at least, for sure.
All right. So
I think it was a simple thing that actually made the sentence make more sense. So what you said was ensure additional supports needed to address learning deficits caused by interruptions to student learning due to the COVID pandemic. That makes more sense rather than just and interruptions. Right?
What you're currently reading is what is on what was in the packet. And
Right.
you're saying that makes more sense than
No, what you read makes more sense.
So
what
I
you said.
read, include additional supports needed to address learning deficits that result from the interruptions to student learning due to the
Yes,
pandemic.
that makes more sense. I knew it was
Okay.
something like that.
Okay, so I think, yeah, I'm not sure what. So I'll make sure that that one, if that's okay with everybody, that replaces what you have in your packet, what I just read.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I think
Okay.
the other ones were just a little bit expanded upon, but that one I think definitely makes more sense the way that you read it. So I think
Okay.
we should definitely change that one in my view.
Okay. Otherwise, let's go with what you had in your packet because that's what you've been reading.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So was there another one?
I just wanted to say I appreciate all the work you did to bring our thoughts together. I know we had a lot the last meeting, and I think I'm in full support of this.
Okay, good. So Mr. Cruson?
I actually have two. I hope they're relatively simple. On the priorities, number 3, the update and support the 5-year plan for the ongoing maintenance of buildings, grounds, and vehicles. My thinking is it might be more appropriate to change vehicles to equipment, because that would be inclusive of the vehicles and other equipment they might have that needs to be maintained, or that we have that needs to be maintained.
If there's no objection to that, we can make that change. Are there any objections? No. Okay, so we'll make that change as well.
And my second one was number 7 says ensure consistency in the support of all extracurricular activities in the district. I believe we already did ensure it, so we probably want that to be continue. We want in some way we want to make it say that we want to continue that instead of it being a new item. Ensure continuation of could work.
Well, so these are our priorities. So is this still a priority, I guess, is a question if we've already addressed it?
Well, I do feel it's important to make sure that we continue, that we don't fall backwards on that one.
Okay.
So I do agree with having something in there to make sure we don't go backwards on all the hard work we put in to get to this point.
All right, so ensure the continued support for all extracurricular.
Continued consistency, continued support. That works for me. Ensure continued consistency.
Consistency of what?
Add ensure, add continue.
Yeah, I was thinking it didn't have to be a big change. A word or something would be enough to,
Okay,
just to make sure that we're calling out the fact that we want to continue the practices we've put in place, that we're not looking to reinvent the wheel.
okay. Is there any objection to making that change? All right, with no objection, we'll make that change. And yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Good at that. Number 6, when we talk about contingency, are we talking just of a catch-all contingency line like what the Board of Selectmen budget has? Or are we talking specifically that this would be part of the contingency line that was developed as part of our resolution for the special ed contingency? My concern about that is that in the resolution, it says anything that was not spent would go directly into the non-lapsing fund designated as special education. I'm concerned that that might disrupt at this point. We don't know exactly what's going on. It might just be better to have it a run-of-the-mill contingency for this year until we really work out with the other boards how we're going to handle our special education from year to year. Because what I'm concerned about is, as you saw last budget season, members of the Board of Ed was saying, just get rid of the contingency. And it could cause disruption to the discussions with other boards.
All right, I'll address this and then I'll let Ms. Harriman States address. So I believe, and I'm not sure about this, but I don't think we can just put in a contingent. I don't think it's legal to just put in a contingency for the entire budget. We can check on that legally to make sure, to answer that question.
Yeah, because it was recommended in I think it was the Board of Ed by Dan Rosenthal. It was recommended that the Board of Ed have a contingency, and they said that would be some level of multiple of the town's contingency.
Yeah.
So the people again, are already talking about it.
I don't think it's legal, but we can look into it. The other thing is, this was meant to be specifically for special education.
Right.
So Ms. Harriman States, did you want to?
No, I would not be in support of making it a general contingency. We worked very hard for many years to develop a contingency line specific to special education in our budget. My focus is on what's best for kids, not what's best for the other boards. And so I really feel strongly that we need to keep this item as a priority in our budget. And I do like the way it's written to include the average of the 5 years. I think we talked about that last time. I think that was your idea. And I like that adjustment, but I am in full support of making it clear that it's for special education.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. So when we put it in, we'll say of this contingency, 400,000, whatever it turns out to be, is designated specifically for special ed. What I'm concerned about is, and so we can make it clear that the point of that money is definitely special ed. What I'm concerned about is just the automatic movement of the money to our non-lapsing fund may make people turn around and actually remove the money from our budget. And that's, so we're on the same page in terms of being for the children. It's just the question of not letting the turmoil that we're going under right now with the non-lapsing account, not letting that influence this particular line item.
So can I ask, are you proposing changing this or what is it?
I don't think it needs to change because it says maintain a contingency item. It doesn't say maintain the special ed contingency item that the resolution called for. So I think we've got wiggle room here, but we should talk with people in terms of, making sure that there are no hard feelings or misunderstandings in terms of what we are planning to do going forward.
Okay, so we can leave it as it is, and are there any objections to leaving it as it is? No, okay. And with the idea that knowing that there is discussion ongoing right now.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, changes? Okay, so with the changes as proposed that had no objections, I think we can vote on this if everybody is comfortable. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And did Mr. Goro say yes? I think let's see, I'm working on my volume. Is that you, Mr. Burrows?
He did say
I
yes.
said aye.
Thank you. All
Well,
right, so it's unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for that. All right, and that brings us to our first read on a new policy, 5145.42 racial harassment, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Herman Stites to give us the scoop on this one.
Thank you. As you might recall, in the last policy committee report at our last board meeting, I spoke about this policy and said that we had made the decision to take another look at it, and we have. You'll see in red and purple the things that we have added. I think mainly what you need to draw your attention to is the introduction of a diversity compliance coordinator. Dr. Rodriguez can speak to that more fully if anyone has any questions, but this is in keeping with the resolution that the board put forward and Dr. Rodriguez's plans around diversity and equity. So I don't know if you want her to speak to that now or if you want me to go through the rest of the changes in the policy. I think it's important for the board to understand that role as we discuss this policy. And Mr. Cruson is saying yes. So I'll cede the floor through the chair to Dr. Rodriguez, if that's okay.
Okay, Dr. Rodriguez.
So, and we actually originally, if you recall, had diversity compliance officer. We thought this was a much better title. And we really view this position as someone who can work very closely with our staff, our leadership team across the district, and families and students. We had, if you recall, I shouldn't say we have a position right now who work with the Sandy Hook families, the most highly impacted. And that is Genia Brockett. She's done a fantastic job. And I think of Genia when I think of this position because you really need the right person. You really need someone who is a liaison between the families and the students and the leaders. And while the leadership team, the building principals, our central office staff, work every day trying to resolve issues that occur, not just on racial harassment, but all kinds of harassment, bullying. And sometimes, as you heard from many of the conversations, community conversations I had with students and parents, that they might not always get resolved satisfactorily. And again, there's, no finger pointing, but we really do have to look at that and put someone in place who we feel would be able to be that really strong liaison to help resolve issues. And I also see this position as someone who would go beyond that, working with the kinds of professional development and training that needs to occur, looking at our resolution, looking at curriculum and instruction, and being a part of that whole team. So I see this role as multifaceted, and I think hopefully our peak subgroup will be able to speak to that too and look at what role that will play and the job description. So it's something I'm quite excited for. I think it's necessary. And I think every district should have someone in this position because I think it's important.
So I'll just keep going with the policy, and then if there's questions about the full policy, including that, we can answer them at the end just so that we can get through at least this part of it. So in addition to that change with the addition of the diversity compliance coordinator, there's language around yearly reviews of the protocols, making sure that we're following the reporting requirements. If you'll also recall, part of the resolution and the diversity and equity policy was that the board would be informed of incidents of racial harassment. That is something that the district compliance coordinator would have a hand in as well. There's also information that we added here about reporting, including the anonymous alert app that is available for students in grades 9 through 12. The regulation has been adjusted to reflect the diversity compliance coordinator. But something that we talked about in the policy meeting is just ensuring that the procedure to report incidents, that it's clear to students, staff, and parents, so that this, the regulation is really those steps that need to be taken. But we all know that a policy and regulation are only as good as folks know that they exist. And so a real effort to make sure that people are aware of the steps that they need to take and the supports that are available to them is going to be an important component of the implementation of this policy. So that's what I have right now.
Okay. Thank you. It's an important policy. Do we have any questions? Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
At least they can't hear me say darn it, right? Is the diversity compliance coordinator going to be a full-time position, or is it going to be an added set of responsibilities to an existing position?
That's something we're thinking about. I mean, this really should be a full-time position. I don't see how that person could do, another larger task or handle larger responsibilities and that, because I think with training and PD and working with families and the leadership team and students, I think that will take up a full-time position. Again, do we think this will be someone from the outside coming in as a brand new position, or someone here that, might take it on? That's something we would offer it up.
Okay, do you want me to continue with, I've got three just in terms of content and to understand positions of other members of the board also. So I can do them, or I can wait and let others intermix.
Is there a follow-up on this part of the discussion? Yes, Mr. D'Elia?
I guess I have a concern with the creation of a diversity compliance coordinator, and I'm going to explain my concern, hopefully, so that everybody understands exactly where I'm coming from. We're a big district with many schools, and if we're going to have one person as the lead for this, say there's something happening at Middlegate and Sandy Hook at the same time. Now, why wouldn't we put this in the hands of the school counselors and the people that know the kids, and then have it go through the proper channels rather than creating this position? Why wouldn't it just go, the school counselors would talk to somebody, and then that would go to the assistant principal or the principal, and up the chain that we've already established, which is a very appropriate chain, and these people know the kids, rather than creating a position that's an umbrella position over the entire district.
So, Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes, so that's an excellent question. The issue is that this person would work with the leadership team and the counselors. This isn't something that all student issues or families would go directly to the liaison or to the coordinator, excuse me. This coordinator would work as a liaison with the families and the students and the staff. And again, these are issues that don't necessarily get resolved working with the leaders or the building administrator. So again, it has to kind of hit that threshold. And I think a lot of it is proactive, not just the reactive. It's working with and getting to know families and students and working with staff so that those issues happen less frequently. So we're not cutting out counselors. That would, students would still go through the normal process of meeting with a counselor or seeing an assistant principal. That would still occur.
May I continue, or do I?
Is this along the same lines?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I guess, Dr. Rodriguez, my question is, so then what role does this person play? Is this person an evaluative person? Is this person,
No.
I think that if this is a very serious topic and very incredibly important topic. And I'm concerned that if we create this position, is this position going to properly address instances where where it needs to be addressed. And I guess my question is, we have a protocol that we follow that everybody knows. And now if we inject someone else into that protocol, where does that person get injected? Does that person get injected above a school psychologist, above an assistant principal, above a principal, just below the superintendent? So there's a lot. It just seems to me like it's a layer, and I'm concerned that one, the layer will create a bypass for other layers that are extremely effective and important in education. And then two, there might be instances where a school counselor could handle something and they won't even be able to address it because it goes to the coordinator.
So I don't see this as a hierarchy as you're speaking to this. I see this more as, again, someone who is working with the students, the leadership team, and even central office. So it isn't I go right to the district coordinator, but that district coordinator would be working side by side with those counselors and social workers, school psychologists, to help sort of be the liaison between the families and students. A lot of what I heard in the community conversations was just that. They did go to the counselors. They did seek out help from the principals, and it's to no fault of anyone's. It just, some of it didn't get resolved. And aside from that, there was also a little bit of talk about how I felt uncomfortable because I had been to the principal or whatever several times and felt really uncomfortable that I'm always the one complaining. And I really would like someone to talk to that was really kind of unbiased to all of it. So that was another piece of it. So again, this isn't something that we have all figured out tonight. That's why we want to work at, what does this position look like? We want to make it work for the whole district.
Yeah, okay, thank
Can
you.
I
I guess
just ask a clarifying question, Mr. DeLeo, before you go on? Just in terms of when this position would be created, is this something we're talking about doing in this budget, or is it something we're talking about doing in next year's budget?
That's a good question. We'd have to see how long it takes to really create this position. And again, just in hearing the questions, I want to make sure we do this the right way and that everyone has confidence and we feel comfortable with the position. And there's clarity around what that role looks like. I don't want anyone to think it's a hierarchy and, we're stepping on other staff members, because that is not the case. And again, I brought up the care navigator. I brought up Junior for a reason. There's a very good example of someone who works side by side with everyone in the district. And that's very important because I think the role will be very similar. I also there was something in the regulations where we took, there was a piece there that I want to make sure we fix. Because when we put in district coordinator throughout, and replace superintendent, right? There is a place in there where it talks about not evaluation, but discipline. And I don't really see this person's role as being a disciplinarian. That's really not the goal here. So I want to make sure that that's made very clear, because they take a very different role as a disciplinarian, and that's an administrator's position.
Thank you very much. I think that I'm sorry, may I finish, Dr. Koo?
Yes, Mr. DeLeo. I know, Mr. Kowski, you have other questions beyond this? Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't, I'm just, in reading it, I was worried because I saw things like if students who believe they've been subjected to racial harassment are to report the incident to the diversity compliance coordinator, and I was just worried that would create, I want the kids to be able to go to people that they know, and I don't want them to feel like so I think I've made my point, and I hope that I've just made it clear that I just think it's important that we have this wonderful staff that support the kids every day. They know the kids, they love the kids. I don't want this to become something that's undermined.
Well, interestingly, Interestingly, in here, it was the building principal or the superintendent. That's less likely to happen. To be honest with you, that takes it to the highest level. So I think, making, that's why it says the building principal or the, because I think, and we might even want to rethink that because it should be really a closer relationship. It can be both.
And I understand this is a first read, and thank you for listening to my comment.
Ms. Harriman States, did you have a comment to?
I just also wanted to remind the board that a lot of the procedural work that talks about the district compliance coordinator is in the regulation. And I believe that when this person is brought online, part of what I would like them personally to be charged with doing is to look at this regulation and to really draft it with a different eye towards what we wanted, what we want this to look like in the future. I know that Dr. Rodriguez and I have talked about ideas like restorative justice and bringing two people into a room to have a conversation and that sort of thing. I think all of that should go into a new regulation. This regulation is basic, should go with part of this policy, but know that this regulation can change without board approval, just with administrative rewrite. So I do believe there's things in the regulation that could be adjusted going forward as we move into a new reality with possibility of bringing this role on.
Okay. So were there any other questions? Ms. Zukowski, did you have follow-up that you wanted? Okay.
So I was curious about the process for modifying or creating companion regulations. So the administrative regulations are not board approved, but they are presented to the board and the board gets to discuss all amendments to them, or is it possible that they would happen and the board would be unaware of changes in the regulations, the companion regulations?
The board doesn't approve regulations at all. But of course, if there is a significant change to policy or, a regulation, I guess,
we brought it forward.
that they would bring it forward to board, especially in a situation like this where the regulation is changing based on a new position and that sort of thing. But regulations do get changed, not frequently, but they get changed based on day-to-day practice. And so that would be, I think a lot for the administration to bring every changed regulation to the board every single time it happens.
And that's the point. I think as practices change, the regulations change, and sometimes they're minor, so we don't have to bring them forward. But as Mrs. Stites said, this is something that's larger than that. So once we really put this together and we know that we've made changes that are more significant, then we would certainly bring that forward.
And also just to follow up on that too, if there are substantive changes to a regulation, frequently that would mean that there needed to be policy things that needed to be adjusted. So that would be brought forward to the policy committee and then we'd bring that forward to the board. So small changes in regulation wouldn't have an impact on the policy and therefore the board wouldn't see them. But if they were major changes, they would have an impact to the policy. And
that's
bring them forward to the board.
Exactly what I was asking. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on the discussion about the creation of a position, just because in some ways I feel like we need to create the position before having the policy, although we could revise the policy with the position once somebody is hired. But that was sort of why I was asking whether this is a this year proposal or a next budget year proposal, because we did actually include in the priorities that we just passed the idea that there's support for professional development and staffing that furthers the district's resolve to maintain safe and inclusive and equitable learning environment. And I want to be careful that when we do create positions, I know that there's a lot of discussion about whether that was, a budgeted item and whether we planned it out. And so I just want to make sure that we have that full discussion. And so that's where I'm thinking right now. So Ms. Herman States, did you want to respond to
Yeah,
that?
I mean, and that's definitely a conversation that we had at the policy level too, just so the board is aware. You know, but Dr. Rodrigue is very focused on addressing this issue, and we decided to bring it forward to you with the inclusion of the position, knowing that it would really spur some conversation to try to, you know, figure out the best way to do this. In some ways, it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing. You know, but the board's opinion on how to move forward, I think, is appreciated.
Mr. Cruson?
I actually mentioned this during a subcommittee meeting as well. But the way it's worded, it doesn't necessarily have to be its own standalone position. It could be, I mean, we could name an existing person the coordinator, either in a short term or over a long term. We've done it before in, I think it's Title IX, calls for an officer who actually happens to be, I believe, the assistant superintendent at the moment. But it calls out a position that isn't its own standalone position. It's a title handed off to an existing. So I think this policy addresses that, where we can have someone doing the job. We can pass the policy without the expectation that we have to immediately create the brand new position. But the idea is, or at least the current administration's goal is that this would become a permanent position in the future. That's just sort of the understanding as we have these discussions.
Thank you. That helps explain a great deal. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on this? Ms. Dukowski?
So on a different topic now, just to make sure I understand the scope of the policy, not the administrative regulation at this point. The policy says racial harassment of students consists of different treatment on the basis of race and is recognized in two different forms. When the district's employees or agents acting within the scope of official duties treat a student differently than other students solely on the basis of race. Now, would it be considered racial harassment if there was preferential treatment based on race?
Isn't that different?
So this includes preferential treatment. So somebody says, you know, I let me give you extra help or extra supplies because you have a different skin color. So that even preferential treatment would be considered racial harassment.
Are you talking on the positive side?
I'm just trying to understand what number one means, because as it's written, number one also means preferential treatment, which, you know, generally I don't hear of preferential treatment being considered racial harassment. But
no, and to be honest, this was really, I mean, inherent in this, and I think implied is there's a negative impact somewhere.
So would it make sense to modify the language to focus on the negative impact, or to call out that it would be a negative impact? Because as written, it would appear to apply to conduct that wouldn't necessarily have a negative impact.
I mean, I'm happy to look at alternative language if you want to submit it to the policy committee.
Okay.
You're talking about treating a student differently. That alone could mean either or. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Submit to policy committee. I will do that.
Okay. With more, Mr. Coates.
May I just comment? May I offer?
Yeah, Dan. Oh, Mr. D'Elia.
I would just argue, and I'm not going to submit anything, but I would just argue treating anyone differently based on race is the definition. And one person's view of something that's good might not be another person's view of something good. And I think we have to be careful with how we word things. I like the general wording. So that's just my opinion on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
a response to that, please? The problem is it's the word harassment that typically is considered negative.
All right, well, let's let the policy subcommittee have this discussion and they can bring us back a recommendation. Ms. Zukowski, did you have more?
Yeah, so 2 more. In reporting incidents of bullying, harassment, and racism, you talk about an anonymous alert app is available to students in grades 9 to 12. What was the rationality for starting at 9 as opposed at 7?
Right. So we had this conversation. Dr. Rodrigue, can you, Dr. Rodrigue, paging Dr. Rodrigue? Dr. Rodrigue, can you speak to, we talked about this in the committee, and then you followed up with your staff on this. So if you could just explain to Ms. Zukowski that idea.
So the reason, because I think the question at the time posed was, why can't we move that? Remember, we had a discussion about, well, how about elementary? How about Reed? And I think they do have it in some small pockets at the middle school. It was primarily meant for 9 through 12, however. And that was because they do have more access to cell phones. And at the time, even now, younger students don't normally carry them and don't normally use them. And they felt that we wanted the younger students to be able to go to a trusted adult first. And that was really the rationale.
Okay,
And that's what typically happens now.
thank you.
And did you have one more?
Just one more. So you had said in your summary that, one of the things you wanted to make sure was within the policy is that the board would get updates about these incidents.
It's not in this policy, it's in the equity and diversity policy and in the resolution that we passed.
Yeah, so the equity and diversity policy 0523 basically says there will be a summary of the overall diversity goals. Are we sure that that would include the details that this type of a policy would entail?
The resolution definitely talks about reports to the board about incidents of racial harassment. So when it talks about the goals, that's the goals that is referring to when we pass that policy.
I don't recall the resolution doing the report to the board.
If you would like us to include a line in this policy, I think that's fine too. But it was definitely part of what we discussed as part of the resolution.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
If you would like to submit some language that would appease that for you for this policy, I think that would be appreciated by the committee.
We'll do so. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments on this policy? All right. Sensing none, if everybody could get comments, questions, any change in wording to Ms. Herman Stites before, when is your next meeting?
Next Wednesday.
Before next Tuesday, that would be much appreciated. All right.
Can I speak one
Yes,
last second about that?
Ms. Herman
And I
Stites.
just want to make sure that board members understand that even if they submit suggestions and possible language to the board, to the policy committee, we do have a thoughtful, thorough discussion on every board member suggestion, every suggestion from members of the public. So when we bring back the policy to the board, if we do not include the language that you've suggested, it is not because we didn't hear it or understand your rationale. It's because we had a thorough policy discussion on it and we made a decision to use it or not use it based on administrative expertise and the policy committee. So I just want to.
I appreciate that, but it would help, others to just hear the rationale or hear a summary of the discussion rather than just being, just having it sort of fall into the big abyss.
I understand that, but that's why we have committees to do committee work. And so it's not a big abyss. We go through them, and I encourage you to come and join and listen into our policy committee meetings. I think the work of the committees are so that the work of the board remains clear and focused. And I think that if we go through every single policy line by line in the board meetings, then the policy committee really doesn't need to exist.
Is the purpose of our committees, is so that we're not doing all the committee work here at the board level. So I think that is, and for those members who are interested in the discussion that happens around this, all of the meetings are currently being recorded, and certainly there are minutes available. So that's all available. All right, did I see somebody with a hand up that I skipped over? No, okay. All right, are we good on policy? Yes, we are good. Okay, so let's move on to discussion and possible action on the appointment of a Board of Education delegate to the 2020 CABE Delegate Assembly on November 19th, 2020. And before we do any motions, I just want to explain what this is. We did this last year. We probably should have been doing it all along. And essentially, the Delegate Assembly is where CABE sets the legislative agenda. It's not the agenda, but it informs how they set the legislative agenda. So there's a book that comes out with all of the resolutions. Each of us as board members are welcome to participate in that delegate assembly. We can have our entire board attend the delegate assembly if you'd like, but we only get one vote. The votes depend on how many students we have in the district. So we need to appoint one member. I am planning on going, but I don't want to, supersede anybody else who would like to be considered as a delegate. But I would appreciate if you would include me in the motion to appoint the delegate to the assembly. But I open it up to discussion in case anybody else would like to also be considered. Is there any other conversation on this? No. All right, so I'll entertain a motion on this particular action.
Board of Education appoint Dr. Michelle Embry-Koo. Did I say your the second name right? Did I say that right? Dr. Koo? Sorry. I'll start over. I move that the Board of Education appoint Dr. Michelle Koo as delegate to the 2020 CABE Delegate Assembly on November 19, 2020. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Second.
Thank you. And we have, so Mr. D'Elia making the motion and Mr. Burrows seconding the motion. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, sensing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Am I missing? No. Yes, and that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. I very much appreciate this. And I do encourage everybody to register to attend because it is a fun-filled afternoon. All right, and that brings us to the minutes of October 6th.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of 10/6/2020.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on this? Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Well, I'd like to make two separate. I'd like to make two separate motions. Okay, the first motion is that on page 4, the second paragraph, the text that reads $400,000 in those 2 years should be changed to $4 million 2020 dollars in those 10 years.
Okay, so your motion is to change essentially the 400,000 to 4 million?
Yeah, because if you listen to the video, it says 4 million.
Okay, and just, oh, so we need a second on that. Is anybody?
Second.
All right, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. And I will say that I did go back and listen to the video, and it does indeed have Ms. Zukowski saying 4 million. So is there,
Yeah.
is there any other further discussion on this? All right, so to change the 400,000 to 4 million, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Boros, are you there?
No, I'm not opposed at all.
Mr. Voros and I have to abstain because I don't think either one is correct.
Well, we
Thank
weren't
you.
there.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that passes with the 5 of us and Mr. Boros and Ms. Ludline abstaining.
Mhm.
All right,
And then the second motion is I move to, on page 7, the fourth paragraph from the bottom, change the language, offered language in the previous meeting, to instead offered language in her email to the policy committee for its prior meeting. And I'd like to talk, after it's seconded, or if it gets seconded, I'd like to speak to this request.
okay, is there a second? All right, Ms. Harriman seconds the motion.
Okay.
Ms. Zukowski, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, so what happened is in the video, it said, I'd like to speak to my comments. It didn't really say from whence those comments came. The issue at hand is by the language saying in the previous meeting, it gives the impression that that comment was made in the previous board meeting, which it wasn't. So I just wanted to clear that up so that people would understand that it wasn't made in the previous board meeting, but rather in an email sent to the policy committee.
Where is this change? I can't find it. I'm sorry.
All right, so I don't have the,
Page 7, I believe it's the 4th paragraph from the bottom. Starts with Ms. Zukowski wanted to set the bar higher and offered language in the previous meeting.
Thank you.
all right. So again, I will just offer that I did go back to watch the video, and the video says I had offered the language in my comments, and there wasn't a qualification of when. So that's my contribution to this. Yes, Ms. Harriman Stites?
I understand what your intent of your comments were that you made in the board meeting, but I just don't think that we can be in a practice of adjusting the minutes to reflect what you meant, not what you said. And so I think if you want to adjust it to say in my comments, which is what you said in the meeting, I'm fine with that, but I'm not fine with clarifying it further because that's not what you said in the meeting.
That makes sense.
Anybody else? I guess I struggle with this because I feel like we're making corrections to minutes that that Mrs. June spends a lot of time going back and reviewing video and making sure that she gets the gist of everything that we're saying. We're not meant to copy down exactly what we're saying in meetings, and I think the more we ask for precision, we want precision, but at a point it ends up being a lot more time spent on minutes than we should be spending on minutes, even. Yeah, so that I'll leave it at that. Yes, Mr. Delia?
I 100% agree with what you just said. Thank you for saying that.
All right, any further comments? All right, so all those in favor And any opposed? All right, and then 2 abstentions, I'm assuming, Mr. Boros and Ms. Lightline? Okay, so that's, what are we? The 3 of us. So Ms. Herman Stites, Mr. Cruson, Ms. Koo in favor, I'm sorry, against, and Mr. Dalia against, Ms. Dukowski in favor, and Ms. Lidline and Mr. Boros abstaining. So that motion fails. And now we're back to the motion to approve the minutes of October 6th. Is there any other further discussion on the minutes of October 6th? All right, sensing none, all those in favor? And those opposed? And any abstentions? Mr. Boros?
Yes, abstain, of course.
Okay, so we have 5 in favor and then Ms. Lidline and Mr. Boros abstaining. So that motion passes and the minutes are approved. And that brings us to public participation. If there's anybody still on the line who would like to address the board at this time, we welcome your input. Just identify yourself and unmute yourself with a *6. All right, I'm not sensing any public comment, so we will move to adjournment. If somebody will make the motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Cruson seconds, Ms. Lidla, or I mean, Mr. Cruson makes the motion, Mr.